just totally hijacked my life at that time. $100, then it was meant to be just $500, then it was, I went through $30,000 in a month. And I came from a great family. I had a great husband. I have 6 amazing children. If it happened to me, it's happening to others. And that's not okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the One Day at a Time Gambling Addiction Podcast. Kate, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I know we had some scheduling issues just because it's really early in the morning for you over in Australia. You're from Canberra?
Yes.
It could be interesting to dive into a couple of different avenues today. First, I definitely want to hear about your story and the work that you're doing. And then maybe for our international audience, international meaning everything outside of Australia, helping them understand what gambling looks like in Australia could be really helpful. But why don't we just start by hearing a little bit about you? Kate, tell us about yourself.
Oh, I grew up in Sydney. I know you've been there. I mean, I was one of 7 and loved being in a big family, and that's why I have 6 children of my own. So grew up in the suburbs, thought as an 18-year-old, just go out socializing with my friends, and every single venue I went into had poker machines, which is slots for you in the US. Because they're housed in community social venues, it wasn't like I left my house and went, I'm going to the casino. I just didn't understand that they were such a harmful product, and sat down with my boyfriend. He showed me how to use it, and a couple of presses in, I have a win. And it absolutely did something in my mind and body that I was not ready for. Had no education to know how to navigate. And as an 18-year-old, I'm just thinking, well, that was easy, it took me so long to work for the money that I was earning at that time. And that then just set this thing in motion that all of a sudden my brain just tuned into the fact that there was literally a venue with poker machines on every corner that I went to. And even if I left the house thinking I'm just going to go meet friends or I'm going to work, I would drive past a venue and I would think about, hey, remember when you put in that money and you won? Like, that could happen again. And so very, very quickly, I started spending more time and money in gambling venues than I intended to. It just totally hijacked my life at that time. And I had no understanding of what that was doing to me as a human being. I started to just hate myself. I started to think, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I stop? And then something pretty miraculous happened. I broke up with that boyfriend. I met my husband. We moved to Canberra. And I thought, I've left all of that in Sydney. I'm going to start a new life, get married, start having a family. And after about 18 months into our marriage, I had one child. We were pregnant with our second, and the mothers group that I was a part of had been meeting in like a community centre, and then we couldn't meet there anymore. And one mum said, well, we could meet at a club. And so I go to the club, and as soon as I walked in there, I heard the sounds of the poker machines, and it just re-triggered in my body something, that I just kind of escaped but not really ever dealt with.
So you went 18 months from the time that you left Sydney into the time that you gambled again?
Yeah.
Let's walk through that a little bit. So how long were you gambling in Sydney before you left?
Probably about 18 months.
About 18 months. So you had developed a compulsion that when you would start gambling, you couldn't stop. But noting that you went 18 months without it, was there like a craving there yet, or like what was it that made you stay away for that 18 months?
I think it was there probably was a craving, um, but I was like on a completely different trajectory. I had met a new partner and we were, like focused on each other and building a future. And it was
Sure.
so completely different to what I had been previously doing, mostly on my own after starting gambling. Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Oh, totally. I just wanted to develop that context for the audience because
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people that develop a problem might go through a period of time where they don't gamble. And so the obvious question is like, well, why not? What was happening during that time that was different than afterwards? But let's talk about afterwards. So you go to the club and you hear the sounds, it gets re-triggered. What
Mm.
does life turn into following that?
It it was a really hectic time in our life and marriage. We had just got a bunch of money to start building a house. We were running our own business. We were expecting our second child, and we'd moved in with my in laws. So it was like this perfect storm of stress. And we were 23, like I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we navigate so much stress in our life? But we were just kind of on this roll of, okay, this is what's happening next. And because I was under that level of stress, that thought pattern of if if I can win, then I can get back, we can build the house sooner and we can, and I accessed some of the money that was there to start the build, and it was meant to be like $100. Then it was meant to be just $500. Then it was, yeah. I went through $30,000 in a month,
And
and
this was the money that would have been used to begin to build your first home.
yeah,
Did your husband know about it? Like, how did he find out?
he found out because that was the first time I wanted to take my life, and I was pregnant, so I didn't. And I went to him and I said, look, I don't know what's happened, but this is how it is. I ended up gambling again, and I can't believe this. I've lost so much money. I don't know what to do. And he just went, oh, so it's just about the money. And I was like, yeah. And he said, so you're not leaving me? And I was like, no, and I was just so confused by how he responded. It was very loving. Him really not understanding the gravity of the grip the addiction had on me, like kind of triggered his insecurity of I don't want this, to end or blow up, in any way. Like it's just money. Who cares? Like let's just move forward. Then I was back in isolation again of not knowing what to do. There was no, with all of the access to gambling, there was absolutely no awareness of this service is available. This, if you're struggling with this, seek help here. None of that existed when I was going through it. Not like, you see now. Even still, like the amount of ads versus the help or the awareness of help is just so imbalanced. Yeah, again, I was left thinking, well, I just have to try and figure it out on my own, or I have to solve this on my own. Because you have that pathway of, you know, A plus B equals C, if I put this much money in, sometimes I get this much, then this equals the solution. And so that's where my brain kept going to try and get myself out of the hole that was getting deeper and deeper.
Sure. Do you think that in that initial experience of telling your husband and it turning into like, oh, it's just a money problem. Do you think that kind of continued it going forward? Because I think that a lot of people, myself included, the first time that we come forward and tell people about like the gambling, the very first time, it's like, yeah, this is a money problem. I made a mistake. I bet too much. Do you think that perpetuated the addiction for you?
I think not being understood in that moment, it was what it was. Like he couldn't come up with answers for me that he didn't have, and I certainly didn't have them. So yeah, it continued, but it wasn't like he greenlit my behavior and was like,
Right.
let's get behind this. It's all fine. I think he like took my cards away for like a week,
Mm.
and then he relied on me to pay all the bills and do all the admin stuff of the house. So he was like, oh, that's not going to work long term. And for a period, like kind of when you confess and there's such a relief of the stress that you've been carrying and the secret you've been carrying for so long, it seems like it's not going to kind of be an issue again. You
Mm.
make all these promises. You're like, it's going to be fine. We'll
Yeah.
get through this. But that ended up just sort of being this cycle of horror for the next decade. 2012, I was just done of trying several times to, like the first time I rang Lifeline in Australia, I got told, just don't wear shoes. If you don't wear shoes, you won't be able to get into a venue, so you won't be able to gamble.
Lifeline is like your gambling helpline specifically.
No, it was that there was no gambling helpline back then.
Oh,
It was just that was if you're in crisis, ring Lifeline.
interesting. So
And
then they probably weren't equipped at all to help gamblers then.
no,
Yeah.
and but ironically, the woman who gave me that advice herself was struggling with gambling. She was like, "Oh, look, I just don't wear shoes, so try that on." And I was like, "What?" I said, if I was addicted to drugs, there would be a rehab. Like, what?
Mm.
Why can't? Where is there a rehab for this?
Mm.
And she goes, there isn't. And she said, if there was, it'd be for men. So that made me feel like I was the only woman struggling with this,
Mm.
especially
Interesting.
given at the time there was no modeling of it in my family. There was nobody I knew that was struggling with this issue. So
Mm.
it just again cemented this, it's my problem. Like I'm the broken one. And it just made me feel so isolated and so profoundly misunderstood.
Yeah, I can imagine. I at one point thought I was the only person on earth that had this addiction, so I can very much relate to the feeling that way. Now you say 2012. 2012 is the first time you ring the Lifeline. Is
No,
that a decade in? Oh, I'm sorry.
that was 2003, the first time I rang Lifeline.
Okay,
2012 was when I almost took my life.
understood.
That
So
was,
there was gambling from that entire period, then that's the decade that the gambling was happening.
yes.
Okay. So then what happens going forward from 2012?
2012, I am just done. I'd been, by that stage, I'd seen a face to face counselor who, again, was just like so useless at the time. They were barely understanding it at all as an addiction, let alone, they give me a bunch of stats like, don't you know, it's 1,000,000 to 1 that you're going to win. And it's like, that's so unhelpful. Like I need someone to explain to me why this is happening, not, don't you know how stupid you are for gambling? Like that
Mm.
was kind of the vibe that I was getting.
Okay.
So when you put your hand up for help and it's unhelpful, you lose hope,
Okay.
and that's why I arrived at 2012 with hope completely lost. Of the only narratives were, you are the problem,
Mm.
you are an addict, um, you are a problem gambler, um, and if you if you've accessed help and it hasn't worked, then there's no help for you. So
Mm.
that was the solution I arrived at, is I just can't keep doing this anymore, and everyone's better off without me. I was pregnant with our sixth child at that stage in 2012, and I'm so grateful that I was, because had I not, I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Wow.
But after putting the last money that I had access to into a machine and sitting there literally crying, um, trying to figure out how to take my life but not harm my child, and couldn't arrive at an answer. I just had no words left. And my husband had rung me like 100 times trying to find me. And I eventually just picked up the phone, and he just said, please come home. And I think, like, had he screamed at me at that point, like, it just would have been too much. But it was it was him finally understanding that this is life or death for me. Like, I can't keep going like this, and I need expert help. But there wasn't any at the time. So I thought. And when he got me home, he just said, tomorrow, like, I will take you anywhere. Like, we'll find someone to help. And that just felt like I was finally seen in it, like that this is something that has a hold of me that I can't figure out on my own, even though I'd tried for over a decade. And it was my son the following morning who reconnected me with my humanity. And he said, Mom, no one could find you last night. Like, what was going on? And up until that point, like, my children knew nothing about gambling, or that I've been struggling with anything. I'd kept it so hidden from them. All they knew was Mum and Dad sometimes fought about money, but that was it. And I just said to him, mate, I've made so many mistakes. I don't know what to do. And he just said, Mum, everyone makes mistakes. And I just burst into tears and thought, oh my gosh, of course. Of course they do. Like, why did I think I'd made too many, or that I'd ruined everything because I'm human? Like, I just felt like, how do I start liking myself again? And realizing that I'd stopped liking who I was back when I was 18 years old. And I'm 32 at that point. And I'd spent that whole time wishing that I could go back to my 18-year-old self and never have walked in to a gambling venue. What I realized was I had to forgive my 18-year-old self, because she was blindsided by something that I was never prepared for, or knowingly sought out. Like, the first thing I say to people that reach out to me is, like, tell me about, like, your first time, because they'll say, oh, I'm just this loser gambler, this blah blah blah. I'm like, whoa, 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 no. tell me about what happened that first time. It's like, oh, well, I was at a friend's wedding, and then people moved into this area of the club that had gambling, and I started and da da da. And I'm like, so you left the house that day thinking you were going to a wedding, and then this happened. This happened to you. Just like I left the house that day wanting to go visit my boyfriend at a club and hang out with him. I had no idea that a machine could hijack your mind and body ever.
Yeah. And I want to hear more about how it did hijack your mind and body, because for the audience that maybe haven't gambled that much, or maybe they know someone that's hooked to gambling but they can't quite understand it, like
Mm.
what was a day in your life like towards the end of your gambling? Like what feelings were you feeling? What did it look like practically, like on a daily basis?
It was just absolute mental torture. Um, I was either so stressed out about what had what had been, how much money I'd lost, trying to figure out how to, pay bills or function the next day, how to exist, to drive from point A to point B without your mind racing of, do I have time? Do I have enough money? Do I have, can I go quickly to the club before I go to, a meeting or whatever? It was just so mentally consuming. Um, Either freaking out about what had happened or stressing about what was coming. I was never present in my life. Um, Even though I was showing up and going through the motions of being a mum and packing lunches and doing, I was so mentally overwhelmed on a day to day basis that it breaks my heart to think about those years of not being the fully present mum I wanted to be, thinking that I'd wrecked it all. You know, it's just amazing the way when you start to be kind to you and you be curious with yourself and what's impacting you, what the truth of the environment is, how those things can be restored, and
Yeah.
you have capacity again to be present and be intentional and be who you want to be,
Yeah.
without being overwhelmed by this external force.
No, I wanted to get to that because I think a lot of people think, okay, if someone is gambling for 4 hours, then they've lost 4 hours of their life. That's it. But what I think is a major thing that is rarely talked about is how much the preoccupation of gambling
Mm,
leads to a decrease in quality of life. So if
mm,
you were gambling that day for, 20 minutes because you snuck in there before a meeting, right? If it
mm.
was just the 20 minutes of time, it wouldn't have been as impactful as it was, because you're telling me that it was the whole day you were thinking about either past mistakes or thinking about how to get it back the next time. And so we're talking about a 24/7 addiction, not just the 20 minutes to a couple hours that you're actually sitting in front of the slot machine. And I really wanted to hammer that point home.
Absolutely. And the fact that I would hear the sounds in my head, even if I wasn't there, even in my dreams, it was so just. There were songs on the radio too that had similar kind of, points in a song that sounded like poker machines. And when they would come on, they would trigger me, like it was intentional. The design, the sounds, the way they work, the losses disguised as wins. So for audiences that don't understand, this is like, say you bet $5 and the lights and sounds will go off like you've won, but it's only $2. So it celebrates you losing $3 in a way that's actually registered in your brain as a win. And that's what keeps the cycle of just the next press, the next press, the next press, because you're getting this positive reinforcement, even if it's not like true, it's a lie. You just lost $3, but it's made your brain think you're keeping on winning, even though the incrementally your amount on the machine is just going down and down and down.
Yeah. Let me, for a second, play the role of angry TikTok commenter for eventually when we get one of these anyway on in the comment section.
Bring it.
Kate, you're telling me life sucks because you keep gambling. You can't stop thinking about it. You're seeing the losses pile up. Why don't you just stop? What's wrong with you?
That is exactly the narrative that the industry perpetuates. Like there's something wrong with you. There's nothing to see here. We're the good guys. We're just providing entertainment. And so that feeds that isolation that the person is so confused by, so consumed by, that there's something wrong with me. It's exactly what the Sackler family did with Oxy, the way that they rolled that out. Like, this is just a harmless painkiller. Like, we're just here to solve your problems. The industry says, we're just providing entertainment. There's no harm. It's just harmless fun. It's a lie. The Sackler family knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly how to roll it out. They knew how to make people addicted. Gambling companies know exactly what they're doing, and they do it intentionally. And then they make the person feel like they're broken. And that labeling of a person that you were a problem gambler is the same way they said to people who are addicted to Oxy, you're the addict. Like, we've done nothing wrong. There isn't a fair playing field of truth in that environment. Was I addicted at that point? Absolutely. But it was it who I was as a human being? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And to be engaging with a product thinking that you have some level of control, the illusion of control, by the narratives that they put out of, just set a limit and stick to it. They know that that is not what happens when you are in front of that machine. The quote I use to help people understand it is, it's a mob boss quote. He said, after building Vegas, we wanted to be able to take people's money without having to stick a gun in their face.
They accomplished it.
They accomplished it. They did. And it's that theft by consent, like that they give people access, and the illusion of control, but they are controlling the whole environment through intentional design and product, manipulation. So it's just absolutely not a level playing field as far as human versus machine.
Gambling can wreck your finances, but you don't have to handle the recovery process by yourself. At GamFin, they help people struggling with gambling debt to take back control in their lives. Whether it's budgeting, debt management, or rebuilding your financial future, their experts are here with real support. Your money doesn't have to define you. Visit gamfin.org today and take the first steps towards rebuilding your financial future. Hope starts here. Check out the description of this video for a link to check them out. Yeah, it always puts me in and it always puts anyone who wants to speak out against gambling into a really bad position, because it's very easy to label us as whining about a system that screwed us over,
Yeah.
right? So we can say like whatever we want, and people will say, "Well, you guys are just the losers who lost," and so it's fun for the rest of us. But what people aren't understanding is that whatever level you're at with this, whether you developed a chemical dependency on it like we did in our brains, where we have to keep gambling once we start, or if you're just the casual gambler who's getting the deposit bonus, you're playing a losing game designed to make you feel like you're not losing. And, it might be easy for someone to comment, well, you should have just known all this and you should have been able to stop. But I think that information gap, like you were pointing to, is keeping people going, thinking that the next time will be different.
Mm,
A big part of my recovery has been myth busting,
mm,
understanding the false beliefs that I had before and why they don't apply now in reality.
mm,
But, most people aren't doing that kind of thinking. They're thinking, man, I got a lock tonight. Like if I just keep going, I'm eventually gonna win, right? So
mm.
it's just a very tough situation, and it's easy for people to throw crap at us for speaking out about it. So I want to thank you for making that point.
Absolutely. It's how they've weaponized shame really that
Mm,
I think has the most power over human beings. And that's the truth that I speak into when I help people reframe it and understand this happened to you. It's not something you ever saw coming or being possible. Um, if you had the understanding that this is a harmless product and it's just fun. Otherwise, Australians wouldn't be losing $32 billion a year, in gambling. Like, how is it our tiny nation of 27 million people losing $32 billion? And that doesn't sound much compared to I'm not across the level of losses that's happening in the US, but per capita, we are the world's biggest losers because of that tiny population carrying that huge financial loss. So, what we do in talking about gambling harm as a public health crisis is recognizing there's a spectrum of harm. Even if you've never gambled, you're carrying that burden of the harm that $32 billion hole is causing to our economy, our communities, our families, our workplaces, our productivity, our, you know, the way that the fabric of society is just being so severely eroded by intergenerational poverty, homelessness, crime, like the crime related, not only like the money laundering that's happening with the criminals, but the crime that results from people being so hijacked by these products that they turn to crime to keep facilitating the addiction. And one woman that I advocate with here in Australia, she spent 2 years in jail because her boss introduced her to gambling, and then she was the financial controller of their company and ended up defrauding the company, and she, you know, lost everything. Not only her future, her super, everything. Paid it all back, went to jail, but can never recover her life. Like that, when you're in your 60s or 70s, like that's all that time of being able to earn money has passed by. So she's an incredible advocate. But when she was in prison, the women's prison, over 75% of the population in there was there from gambling related crime.
really?
Yes.
Wow. I've never heard something like that.
Yes.
I always thought it was a small minority. 75% of the women's prison population when she was there. Jeez.
This is what
That's crazy.
is so alarming about Australia. And the writing's on the wall for the US with the repealing of gambling laws. It's it's absolutely a, a crisis that's unfolding and needs addressing ASAP. But unfortunately, people in power are often in bed with the industry. So that's why this landscape has been allowed to absolutely exponentially grow from the 50s here in Australia to the current gambling landscape we have now.
Yeah.
And one other key point, for the TikTok assholes is um, is even in their most primitive form, like if you're like, oh, I can play them and I don't have a problem, okay, great. Um, but even in their most primitive form, in the early 1900s, in New York, they were gathered up, they were beaten with sledgehammers, and they were thrown in the Hudson because they were so powerfully addictive and were causing havoc, mostly to men because, women, didn't have much access to social spaces in those days. But that that was the landscape. That's why Vegas happened. They're like, oh, we'll put it out in the desert and no one, like will be around them. You'll have to go there if you want to use it. But now think about the modern day poker machine. How far technology has come, how incredibly advanced these systems are at exploiting human vulnerabilities to extract money in the shortest amount of time possible. This isn't pulling a lever anymore. This is fast spins, fast engagement, overwhelm with your brain.
Yeah.
Now think about, how is it that we've traveled, so far technologically in 100 years from that point, but not just completely ignored the public safety element of what happened 100 years ago.
Yeah. It is not looking good. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like the American public, at least, cares yet in the slightest. As I just released a documentary series that
Right.
was diving into this, and it didn't perform all that well. And I think it's just because the people that are interested in gambling addiction, gambling harm right now, are people who are really struggling, right? We want to put out the fire before we begin to rebuild. And so the question becomes, well, if the only people that'll care can't care yet because of what they're going through, well, who's going to care? And so it's a very, very niche group that's talking about it. But that's a bit of a tangent now. I want to reel it back in a little bit. You used a term called weaponized shame, I believe, and I think that was super accurate. In your own experience, in your own journey, when did how did you overcome the feeling of shame and begin to share your story?
Well, it started being unlocked that morning when my eldest, you know, connected me with my humanity, and I was like, up until that point, I'd really hamstrung my husband into knowing really how to help me because, I was like, if anyone ever finds out this about me, like, I would kill myself. Like, I can't handle thinking that people are going to, judge me for what I've been through. And when when I realized that that had been my narrative, like that I'd been so trapped, so committed to taking, letting shame almost put me in the ground, I was like, no, stuff that. Like, no, I I'm human. I'm no different to anybody else. Like, there is nobody who is better than anyone, period. We are all human beings. We are not gods. We're human and we make mistakes. But how we grow from that is what is important. And that isn't something we talk about. We love defining people by their mistakes, and then people identify as their mistake. And it's like, that's so messed up that we don't go, okay, you're human. How do you want to grow? How do you want to use this adversity to feel good, to fire up hope, to help others, And then when I thought about that word hope, because it had been completely lost from me at that point, I was like, hope. And I looked at that HOPE and I was like, help other people every day. And that was the beginning of the Hope Project, in me going, you know what? Here's my scars. Here's my shit. It doesn't have any power over me anymore. I'm going to share it because when I was going through it, nobody was talking about it. Nobody was there for me to walk behind and learn from. It was just figure this all out on your own. And I thought if it happened to me, and I came from a great family, I had a great husband, I have 6 amazing children. If it happened to me, it's happening to others. And that's not okay. I went to this breakfast that I got invited to speak at, and I was shaking so much that I couldn't even hold my knife and fork.
Yeah.
And so I got up and I shared what I'd been through and what I was planning to do about it. And people were just gobsmacked, like absolutely gobsmacked. And I thought afterwards, people just kept coming up and going, well, I've never struggled with gambling, but I'm struggling with this, or I have a father who did, or a brother, or a sister, or an aunt, or it was just like this realizing that my vulnerability created a pathway for people to access their own humanity in a way that was so absent from our landscape at that time. Nobody, everyone was so busy with their plastered facades of I've got it all together, everything's fine, and that's what I tried to keep holding up, in front of others, to just keep pretending I was okay, but I wasn't. And that had shifted. I was okay. I I was still in debt, but I was okay. Our marriage had been wounded, but I was okay. I stopped thinking I'll be happy when, and I started just, you know, getting up and being intentional with my day, employing self care, which is something that wasn't even in my vocab. Um, that next morning after I almost took my life, my husband drove me to a counsellor that I'd never seen before up until that point, and she was amazing. She was amazing. She didn't ask me about gambling at all. She was like, I want to know what you like about you. And I was like, whoa. um, she said, no, you need to tell me 10 things that you like about you. And I just burst into tears and I was like, can I list my children individually? And she said no. And so that homework that evening was to try and think about the things that people had said to me, like compliments that I'd never really let penetrate my skin, because every time someone would say, you're such a great mom or you're such a great friend, I would think, yeah, but if you really knew me, you wouldn't say that. And then I thought, maybe they did know me. It was just me that didn't know me. And I'd let that weaponizing of shame just completely coat me in what I describe as like a plastic bag. Like I was suffocating inside this clear plastic bag that no one could see. But whilst you let shame reside in you, that's how it feels. It's suffocating. And reworking it so that shame resides in the knowing perpetrators of this financial harm. It resides with the industry. It resides with people in power that do nothing. It should never have resided in people who have experienced gambling harm. That's the truth. I don't know if you had the Snickers ads in the US where Betty White turns into, there's guys playing football, and then all of a sudden this guy just turns into Betty White, and they're like, what is wrong with you? And they're like, you're playing like,
Oh, is it the Snickers commercial?
the Snickers commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I show that when I give presentations, and I'm like,
Mm.
the tagline is, you are not you when you are hungry. I help people understand that you are not you when you're in the grip of gambling harm. You may look like you may talk, you may show up at work, you may be in your relationship, but you are not you when you are hijacked by this machine, whether you're in front of it or not. It's got a grip on you. And that is so important to understand because you can address what has happened separate from who you are. Does that make
You know
sense?
that? Absolutely. You know that saying, like, there's so many people on Earth that, like, it's impossible to have, like, an original thought anymore. Like 2 years ago, I pitched that idea as a commercial to, like, four different groups, and all of them said no. And I was like, "Wait, I came up with such a good idea, we should do it." But apparently you came up with it. and I and I just didn't know. But you're not you when you're gambling. Yes, I think that's a fantastic metaphor and a great way of showing like what happens when someone gets into that addictive mindset where it's just like I have to gamble right this second.
Yeah.
Um, just to kind of close our timeline out, the conversation that you had with your son following that was that the last time that you had gambled?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. That's fantastic.
It, it was just, oh. To now have like my children say, like they're worried about their friends and their exposure to gambling, because they feel so empowered knowing what I've taught them about this industry and the myriad of ways that it pops up, like the intersection of gaming and gambling, the intersection of online versus sports betting. It's just everywhere nowadays, and the access that and the grooming that the industry is so paying influencers to model it, and celebrate it and using celebrities to endorse it. It's despicable. It's absolutely despicable that this is the age that we're in at the moment of people facilitating the financial and well-being harm of others is abhorrent.
Yeah, and that's just what we got going right now. But yeah, it is. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think a common saying is like Australia's about five to 10 years ahead of the U.S. So in 10 years, when this conversation still exists on YouTube and people are watching it, um, what do you hope would have changed in Australia? And then I guess that kind of applies to the U.S. What do you hope will have changed 10 years from now?
Mhm. I just want people to see the industry for what they are, which is just predatory, like plain and simple. Um, that is their core business, harming other human beings for their profit. That's as easily as I can say it. And until you understand that dynamic, then we still keep allowing space for people to think that it's okay to engage with, like that there's some sort of safe level or any of that shit, because it's it doesn't matter whether it has a bigger grip on, as I experienced or you experienced. It's just waiting. Like that grooming process is waiting for you to, fall into the trap of thinking that it's harmless, and there is no magic threshold that you are walking along and you're like, oh, now I'm moving into this territory. It happens without your consent, and any exposure to it is creating a vulnerability that can be exploited at any moment. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think that kind of plays into the idea of like, what is responsible gambling? It's kind of a corporate sham.
It's
People say like, why can't you do it responsibly? What do you mean? What does that mean? I don't know. No
that,
one's telling me.
that is the slogan for weaponizing shame.
Yep, that's 100% agreed. For someone who sees themselves in your story and they can relate to what you're saying, relate to this feeling that you're expressing, what can they do to get help? What could they do right now if they close this video out and want to go get help?
I I can't speak to what level of help is available in the US, but that's why I became a recovery coach. You know, I just want people to get the truth of what's going on here, and be able to rebuild their life in a way that is free from gambling harm. It's why I wrote the book. It's called I Bet I Can Change Your Mind. And it's about helping people understand what has happened to them and all the dirty tricks that the industry is using to make you feel like you are the one that is broken. And it's a despicable tactic. And yeah, so if if you try and source help in your local area and it isn't helpful, then please reach out, and I will try and give you some truth bombs that will help you to navigate this more successfully. And that, look, at the end of the day, I want to empower people to become advocates in their own towns and cities to fight this industry, because it's not just going to be defeated by you or I. It's about people calling out um, the celebrities that are getting behind this, like turning the tables. Right now, they have so much power and so much resources that they're utilizing to keep normalizing gambling in our environment when it is a harmful product that is causing intergenerational damage. Any which way you look at it, whether you engage with it or not, it is damaging your community. So until there are appropriate safeguards around these harmful products, they shouldn't be accessible to pretty much anyone. So if I can help fire up people to become advocates to protect the well-being of their communities, that's my goal.
Yeah. And in the description of this video, there's definitely going to be a link to all of your resources as well as the book that you mentioned. So, to anyone interested, make sure you check that out. Kate, I have just one more thing to kind of ask you then. Project Hope, at its core, what do you hope to accomplish? And, like, practically, what does your day to day work on that look like?
The Hope Project is me talking in schools, workplaces, conferences, whatever, to um, redefine how our society views gambling and how it's actually destroying our community right in front of our eyes. So that is the core of what I do, and I am so grateful to engage with people like yourself all over the world. Gambling harm is not just impacting the US and Australia, it's happening globally. And the way that I use the word hope in helping other people every day, the industry uses hope to fuel use of their products. They dangle hope that their products are a solution to the financial crisis that people find themselves in. And that co-opting of hope is so despicable that I have made it my mission to try and reclaim it for good.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I see it just exactly as you're painting it. Everyone thinks that gambling is the way out because everywhere you look, that's what it seems to be. But sharing stories like this, having conversations like this, I hope to kind of help to fight back towards the other direction, back towards reality, in essence.
Yeah.
Is there any message you'd like to leave the audience with?
Please, if you are in the grip of being impacted by gambling harm at this point in time, you are not broken. You have been impacted by a harmful product, and I'm so sorry that it has impacted your life. But you are not your struggle, period. Um, and I, I'm sorry that our that people in power haven't done what they are supposed to do in protecting you from environments that harm us.
Well said. Well, Kate, thank you for coming on and sharing your story as well as your mission and what you're doing now. To anyone in the audience that still feels like they're the only person on earth with this problem, I want you to watch this video next because it's going to prove otherwise. And let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.